And then Bruno will be jumping into the second question, which does come from an agent. So the agent says that they have a lease that's coming to an end on the 30th of November, which is next week, this month. The tenant then asked if they could stay on until end of December because they were writing exams, right? We then agreed that she could or stay on until the end of December. Today, the agent gets informed that she's actually moving out at the end of this month in November. So she's now gone against her word of moving out at the end of December. She's decided that no, end of November, she'll actually move out. The question then is, can the landlord then hold them responsible for December's rent on the basis, of course, that they indicated that they'll only move out at the end of December? Bruno?
So look, the simple answer is around the fact that lease agreements don't necessarily need to be in writing. So that's the one issue that you may experience, but it does come down to what the lease agreement actually says. So based on this question, I'm making the assumption that the lease wasn't renewed. So everyone was accepting of the fact that by the 30th of November, it was going to lapse. Maybe there were renewal notices that were sent out earlier and everyone had accepted it. And at some point or another, the tenant asked whether the lease could possibly be extended by 1 month. And this was agreed to. So for all intents and purposes, this could be considered a form of agreement. If the lease agreement requires that the lease only be varied or amended in writing signed between the parties, that could also pose a challenge. So there's a lot of different moving parts here. Unfortunately, with the information we have, we're not going to be able to answer, because another argument could potentially be that the written lease no longer applies anymore because it was going to be terminated. So this extension was actually a new agreement outside of the written lease, and it was a new basis of occupation given that the lease had expired. What I can tell you, though, is whether that applies or not, and whether we want to get complicated in the arguments that we have. If there was a verbal agreement that the tenant would stay until the end of December, and let's say this was an email, for example, then there's very, very good prospects that the landlord could very well hold the tenant to this. I believe it, especially if it is in an email. And I do feel that the landlord is not on the back foot with this one. He could actually be a bit more aggressive and claim the rental amount. Whether the tenant's going to pay or not is a completely different story. If there's nothing in writing and this was barely an agreement and it was a notion that at some point was put forward, but no one actually did anything about it or no one acted on it, something along the lines of, oh, do you think it's possible that I could stay till the end of December? Let me know if it is, right? Something along those lines, then no. I can honestly say that there was no consensus between the parties, no meeting of the minds, and certainly no intention to create a legal obligation. And so I think you first need to start at that kind of grassroots level when it comes to, was there actually an agreement, whether valid in terms of the written lease or not? And if there was, then one can look at it and start looking at the technical points of whether the lease would allow for an agreement like that to be entered into, whether it was outside of the lease, and what the terms of the agreement were. But I do feel that if there is something expressed, that the landlord does have some prospects.
Right. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. There you have it. That does bring us to the end of today's episode, and I do believe we'll be back again next week, Tuesday, with more questions from you guys that we'll be taking and giving you more answers. Thank you very much, and that brings us to the end of today's episode. Thanks, guys.
Cool. Thanks.
Yes.